Good morning, Thomas. We're very pleased to have you here today. So a big welcome, because you are a big name in sustainable development in Belgium. And so we're going to do this interview about the role of boards of directors for sustainable development. So please, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Yes, with pleasure. I am an entrepreneur and an industrialist in terms of my involvement with public corporations. I've been recently and for 9 years chairman of KBC Group, Belgium's largest banking and insurance group. But as I say, I'm foremost an industrialist, and I've been for many years associated with Umicore, an industrial company, a materials technology group in Belgium, and globally active in battery materials, in catalyst for emission control for cars, in recycling, and so a company which has very much has sustainability at its heart. And I'm now also joining the board of DSM, a Dutch chemical and nutrition group, which is also very much into sustainability. So I came across this theme in many of my activities.
Yes, of course. And you made a big shift within Umicore during your CEO-ship, but you also were the founding chairman of the Shift, if I understand well?
Yes, the Shift is a coalition of corporations and NGOs in Belgium which promote sustainable development. And so it's a coalition of the willing, a coalition of the more progressive elements within the corporate world, and maybe also the more progressive elements in the NGO world, because it's those NGOs who really want to cooperate to make change happen.
Yeah, we really know the Shift as a big example in Belgium. You're a very active man. You also are the chairman of the Commission Corporate Governance, aren't you?
Yes, indeed. I was asked a couple of years ago to lead it, and I did that with a lot of pleasure and with a lot of interest. And it was especially a very interesting trajectory to come to the new Belgian Corporate Governance Code, which was published last year and which is due to come into effect really this year. That's why we called it the Code 2020.
Yes, of course. I would like to talk a little bit more about the Corporate Governance Code 2020, and especially about its second principle. The board should pursue sustainable value creation by the company by setting the company's strategy, putting in place effective, responsible and ethical leadership, and monitoring the company's performance, and of course also the principle 2.2. In order to effectively pursue such sustainable value creation, the board should develop an inclusive approach that balances the legitimate interests and expectations of shareholders, but also of the other stakeholders. So you were also at the origin, of course, with the other members of the committee, of the introduction of this principle in the code. Could you enlighten us on that?
Yes, well, I think in a way these terms speak for themselves. We're indeed convinced that we should put this notion of sustainable value creation in its various dimensions at the heart of the purpose of the corporation. So sustainable meaning over the long term, sustainable meaning indeed balancing the interests of all shareholders and stakeholders. Taking into account the legitimate interests of the stakeholders. So these things we found to be very important to put them at the start of the code. And because we basically have the conviction that there is no contradiction in the long term, at least, between the interest of shareholders and the interest of long-term stakeholders. In the short term, they may be sometimes antagonistic and there may be some trade-offs involved. But in the long term, we believe that a corporation can only really create value if it takes into account the legitimate interests of the stakeholders.
That's a very interesting point of view. Of course, could you give a practical example based on your experience in the diverse sectors?
Yes, well, certainly in the industrial corporation, as I said, Umicore has put sustainability at the heart of its strategy, really. It's not some sort of an adjunct to the main strategy. No, we focused in 2000, we decided to put this notion at the heart of our strategy, and that led us to become a world leader in recycling of precious metals. This led us to become a leader in emission control for automotive applications, so making the air in our cities much cleaner, and now to invest into the shift to EVs, electrical vehicles, by being a world leader in battery materials for rechargeable batteries. So we really shifted the portfolio around, taking into account the mega trends that society was facing, by also taking charge of our historical legacy, because Umicore is a company that has roots that go back more than 100 years, and so it had actually quite a bit of historical pollution around our site. So we took that into account, and we proactively made a decision to clean that up beyond what were legal requirements. And I think also in the way we deal with our staff, with our people, with our talent, how we try to promote diversity, equal opportunity in the company. All these were ingredients of the success, and actually Umicore, it's created a lot of value by doing that. If you look at the value the company had in 2000 and the value it has today, it's multiplied by a factor of 15. So it shows that doing the right thing is not antagonistic with creating value, shareholder value over the long term.
It's a very inspiring example, I may say. I think it will convince everyone. You were the CEO at the time when the shift started. Was it difficult, and what was the role of the board of directors?
Well, I've seen examples where the sustainability thinking was really driven by the board of directors, and I have to say that was maybe more the case in KBC, in the bank, where the move was initiated by the board of directors, by the supervisory board. In Umicore, it probably came more from management and from the conviction of management, but certainly the board at that time helped us very much to think these things through, and really encouraged this movement and kept us focused on this line along the road. But so in some cases, yes, it is something that comes up bottom up in a way from the management, from the staff of the company. In other cases, and certainly that's maybe been the case in the financial sector, it was less deeply ingrained, to say the least, in the thinking of the sector, of people in the sector in general. And so there, an outside supervisory board, I think, has played an important role in putting this on the agenda and by driving progress on that front.
So the role of the board is important?
Well, the role of the board is definitely always important, because in the end it's the board that sets the overall direction and selects the right management. But yes, the board clearly has a role to play in that sense, because even if management is convinced that this is the right direction, if the board doesn't support it, it's not going to go very far. And sometimes the board has to do more than that, has to be really the one that pushes in that direction.
The driving force.
Yeah.
Because if I understand well the example of Umicore, you're also pleading for an approach that is internal and external, not only the products, but also internally embedding sustainability in the whole organization.
Yes, indeed. I think it's only makes sense if you really embed it into the strategy and to the DNA of the company. I'm a little bit allergic to the term corporate social responsibility, because even though it may sometimes cover very important notions, but CSR is something that you typically find in a number of companies who dedicate a specific department to doing a few good things. Well, some of these things may be very worthy, very worthwhile, but they are not about sustainability in the long term. I think a company can really only be successful over the long term if it integrates this sustainability thinking in all its dimensions into its strategy. So it cannot be something that you do on the side. You can do that, but my conviction is that that will not help the company to be successful over the long term.
No, it's really integrated part of it has to become part of the culture.
Part of the culture and part of the strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So the title of the video series is the example of the board. The board's walking the talk. What would you give as an advice to boards of directors to make the shift, to be the engine behind the shift? What would you give as an advice to boards and to directors based on your personal experiences?
Well, it's obviously to a large extent sector specific. Sustainability will mean different things to, just to cite my own experience, to a financial institution than it does to a large industrial corporation or to a retailer or whatever. So I think it has to start with what are the main trends, the main challenges deriving from sustainable development for my sector, and then analyzing what are the threats, the constraints that are coming on you, and how to react proactively to them, or how to deal proactively with them rather. And on the other hand, to think about the opportunities. What are the opportunities? How can my company, with these mega trends in mind, how can it distinguish itself? How can it offer unique solutions? How can it innovate? And it is by both analyzing the constraints and the opportunities that face a company in its given sector that you can make these long-term choices about where to orient the strategic development of the company and where to adapt possibly its operating style, its culture, its behaviors.
Yeah, so really develop a long-term vision and then integrate it in the strategy and the culture.
Well, develop a long-term vision on the environment in which the company operates, what is going to be relevant, not only tomorrow, but probably 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and then orient your strategic agenda, your innovation agenda, but also your people agenda around those challenges and those opportunities.
Great. Thank you so much, Thomas. You want to add something else? Maybe I forgot something?
No, I think it was pretty complete. I think it is something that takes sometimes a little bit of courage and determination to initiate, but in my experience, it is really the key to long-term success. And so boards need to have the courage in some instances to initiate this change and to stick with it. It's not going to give results immediately, it's not going to help your next quarter's performance, but it's going to make the difference whether your company is a winner in the next decade, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.